Matthew Carver never raised his voice, but today, his silence was louder than any scream. You saw it too, didn't you? The way he stood at the edge of his own luxury car showroom, unnoticed, unrecognized, and ultimately unwanted. He was supposed to be on a flight to Chicago. Instead, he stood in a corner no one ever looked at, dressed in jeans and a faded hoodie, watching the place he built from the ground up reduce him to a nobody. You didn't mean to overhear it, but you did. The young sales associate, Ryan, laughing to his coworker as he pointed at Matthew's rusted boots and whispered, "Guy looks like he delivers tires, not buys 'em." They both laughed, loud, too loud. And that's when Matthew smiled. Not the kind of smile you wear when you're amused, but the kind that settles over your face when you've seen something you were never meant to see, something ancient, something true. That showroom didn't just gleam with waxed chrome and glass polish. It held secrets, the kind of secrets that don't sleep, the kind you can only find when you stop pretending everything's fine. You saw it then, didn't you? The flicker. On the monitor behind the front desk, just for a second, one frame out of thousands. A face, brief, pale, familiar. Dead. That's when it began to spiral. The light above Bay 6 blinked twice and went dark. The music from the speakers dropped out like someone yanked the cord. And the baby, yes, the baby, at the service counter started laughing, completely out of rhythm with the silence around. Then she said it, clear as day. A name no one had spoken in 17 years. Rebecca. The entire floor froze. Her mother dropped her phone. One of the techs whispered, "No way." Because Rebecca Carver had died in that showroom. In the original office, the one buried behind the new drywall and a glass conference room. Everyone had agreed to stop talking about her. Everyone had agreed. But then something even stranger happened. Ryan, the one who insulted Matthew, walked straight into the glass room, like sleepwalking. He placed his hand on the wall where the old office used to be. He whispered something no one else heard, and then he was gone, just like that. Not behind the wall, not in the bathroom, not in the lot. Gone. No security footage, no alarm. His coffee still warm on the counter, and Matthew didn't flinch. Now tell me, do you feel it? That low pressure behind your ears like something's building, waiting to burst. You shouldn't be here, you shouldn't have seen this. But you are here, and now you know too much. The question, the one no one dared to ask, has finally crawled out of hiding. What happens when the man you insulted never left? Because Matthew Carver was never just the boss. And now that he's back, he's not leaving without her. But here's the part that doesn't make sense. The part even the cameras couldn't explain. Rebecca's voice just came through the showroom intercom, and she wasn't alone. The voice didn't echo. It vibrated, like something was crawling beneath the showroom tiles. Rebecca. The syllables slithered from the intercom with a delay, like it passed through something, or someone before it reached them. At first, everyone thought it was a prank, feedback from an old recording, a ghost file on a forgotten playlist. But the mother of the baby, the one who first heard it, was already crying before the second word came through. No one else reacted like that. No one else dropped to their knees. She knew the voice, not as a name in the news or a footnote in company history, but as something far closer. The way you recognize a laugh you haven't heard since childhood, or a lullaby that only one person ever sang to you. Rebecca wasn't supposed to be remembered. That was the point. That was the rule. There was a payout, a burial, and silence. Even Matthew had stopped saying her name, especially Matthew. But now the audio had ruptured the silence, and something deeper had cracked with it. A technician ran over to the console, fumbling with the dials, yanking cords, swearing through clenched teeth. He ripped out the feed, static silence, then, "I never left." Those 3 words didn't come from the speakers. They came from inside the showroom walls, and that's when it all shifted. Matthew didn't speak, not a word, but his hands moved toward the back of the showroom, slow, practiced, Like he'd done this before, like he knew where the sound was coming from, like his body remembered what his mind had tried to forget. But then, everything paused. You know the feeling. Like when you're dreaming and suddenly realize the dream isn't yours. When a memory shows up in your head fully formed, but it's not yours. You see yourself, your mouth moving, but you don't remember saying those words. You feel cold in your stomach. You feel watched, even when no one's there. That's what it felt like in the showroom. Everyone was standing still, but not by choice, and then you saw something no one else did. A reflection in the glass, just beyond the edge of the lot. Man, wearing your coat, your shoes, watching you. You turned. He was gone. Matthew reached the service door, and that's when she appeared. Not Rebecca, someone else, a woman in her 40s. Her name tag said Harper Jennings, regional manager. But there was no Harper Jennings on payroll, no HR file, no tax ID. The records don't lie, except they do when someone makes them lie. She walked like she belonged, but every second she stood there, she seemed to rot just slightly. Her hair stiffening, her eyes twitching a little too much, like she was listening to something no one else heard. "I've been here since morning," she said. "You just didn't notice." No one had seen her enter, no one remembered speaking to her, but she knew everyone's names, birthdays, childhood illnesses, secrets they hadn't said out loud in years. Harper didn't blink when they asked who she worked for. She just tilted her head and said, "You already know." Then turning toward Matthew, she added, "You should have kept her buried." It was that word, buried, that did it. Something inside Matthew snapped, his face twisted, not in anger, in remembrance. A single word brought everything back. Or maybe it never left. From this moment forward, time stopped behaving normally. Security footage showed events that hadn't happened yet. Customers who were never in the building were suddenly seen at reception. One camera facing the employee break room recorded an empty space for 23 minutes, then, frame by frame, captured a figure decomposing in reverse. Skin rebuilding, hair growing in, lips parting, whispers began circulating. That maybe Rebecca never died, or maybe she did. But she didn't stay dead. But you felt something deeper, something darker, something real. You felt it under your skin like a low-grade fever of doubt. You started checking your phone, didn't you? Old voicemails, screenshots, photos. But something was off. You saw a picture of yourself in the showroom from the previous day. Same clothes, same shoes, same position. But you weren't there the previous day. You were 200 miles away at your cousin's wedding, or at least that's what you remembered. The phone rang. Unknown number. You picked up. Nothing but static. Then a click. Then your voice, your actual voice, saying, "I shouldn't have opened it." That was the moment you remembered. The file, on the flash drive you found weeks ago in the bottom drawer of that old desk you bought off Craigslist, the one labeled, "Do Not View, MC." You opened it, you watched, and you forgot. Until this moment. And now everything is bleeding together. Harper isn't real, or maybe she is, but she's not human. She knows about the file. She knows what was edited out of the surveillance tapes, what no one was supposed to keep. The night Rebecca vanished wasn't an accident. It wasn't murder. It wasn't suicide. It was extraction. And that's what Matthew had been covering for all these years. Not grief, not guilt, something worse. Extraction from what? A memory, a timeline, a body. You see, there's a reason no one could remember Harper's name. There's a reason Ryan vanished. They weren't people in the traditional sense. They were echoes. Artifacts left behind by whatever process Matthew triggered when he tried to bring her back. Because that's what he did. He wasn't trying to mourn his daughter. He was trying to rewind time. But time doesn't bend without a cost. And now it's leaking. Through intercoms, through reflections, through the mouths of babies, and now through you. Because the file wasn't just a video, it was a seed. And now it's in you, and now you're seeing things, aren't you? People on the street you're sure you've never met. smiling like they know you, repeating phrases, laughing at nothing. You walk into rooms and forget why you're there. The mirror in your hallway reflects something slightly behind you, but there's no one there when you turn. You call your mother, but the voice on the other end doesn't match. Your texts rewrite themselves when you read them twice. And the word Rebecca keeps showing up, in signs, in graffiti, even in your dreams. This isn't just a haunting. This is a contamination, and you've been exposed. Now ask yourself the question, the real one, the one no one ever dared to say out loud until today. What if the person who vanished was you? Because the footage from the showroom, dated yesterday, shows you standing at the center of the sales floor, just like you are now, only in that clip. You never left. You never moved. You never blinked. You just stood there, watching, and that version of you is still there, still watching, still smiling, and behind the glass, just barely visible in the background, Rebecca is walking toward you. Matthew stood alone in the dim glow of his private office, the hum of the showroom now, a distant, almost forgotten murmur. For the first time since the impossible began, clarity seemed to settle, fragile and tentative, like a moth resting on a cracked window pane. The security footage, those flickering frames that once distorted reality, now appeared to tell a story. A story Matthew thought he understood. Ryan's disappearance, the voice on the intercom, Harper's impossible knowledge, all threaded back to a single, tangible source. A hidden room beneath the showroom, sealed off and long erased from the eye. Blueprints. He'd found it behind a false panel in the conference room, a cold concrete cell with faint scorch marks on the walls, faded drawings of a child's face scratched deep into the plaster. And there, crumpled in the corner, a box of old tapes, decades old, labeled only with a date Matthew recognized immediately. July 14th, 1997. The day Rebecca vanished. Matthew's fingers trembled as he slid one tape into the ancient player. The screen flickered, warping, then steadied on grainy black and white images. It was a home video of Rebecca, laughing and running through the showroom aisles with a toy car in her hand. But the warmth in the footage twisted like a shadow. The image stuttered, fractured, then rewound abruptly, revealing a hidden figure lurking just beyond the frame's edge. A man, face obscured, watching Rebecca with eyes that chilled Matthew's blood. The tape hissed. Then a child's scream cut short by a sudden silence. Matthew pressed pause, his breath shallow, heart thundering like a warning drum in the quiet room. The footage wasn't just a memory. It was a confession. The man had taken Rebecca. Not out of malice, no. The image suggested something darker, something desperate. The man had tried to save her, or maybe hide her, from something unseen. This was the hidden truth, the missing piece he had chased through years of fragmented memories and half-remembered nightmares. For the first time, he thought, he might be free. But freedom never comes without a price. As he leaned back, the room suddenly dropped several degrees. The faint hum became a low drone, vibrating through the concrete walls. The silence shattered with a faint scratching noise, like nails scraping glass, from the vent near the ceiling. Matthew's gaze flicked upward. No one should be inside. That vent. No one could fit. Yet the sound persisted, growing more frantic, desperate, almost pleading. He blinked, and the room shifted. The tapes now showed a different scene. Same date, same place, but the image was clearer, brighter. And this time Rebecca was older, maybe 8 or 9, and standing in a circle of strangers with blurred faces. They chanted words Matthew couldn't hear but felt deep in his bones, ancient and oppressive. The camera panned down to reveal a symbol etched in the floor, a spiral that seemed to twist inward, like a black hole pulling light and hope into nothingness. Matthew stumbled back, clutching the tape. The memories weren't memories at all. They were layers of truth and deception interwoven so tightly even he couldn't untangle them. This wasn't just about Rebecca's disappearance anymore. This was about something watching, always watching, waiting for the right moment to reach. Through the cracks of time and mind, He could almost feel it now. A weight pressing down on his chest, a cold presence that slithered just beyond sight. Not a ghost, not a hallucination, but something more insidious. Something that thrived in the spaces between what was said and what was silenced. Something that whispered lies disguised as comfort, shadows masquerading as memories. Matthew thought. He heard a voice behind him, soft, coaxing, but when he spun around, the room was empty. The scratching stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence that filled every corner with dread. His phone buzzed on the desk, lighting up with a single message. "You're not crazy, they lied to you. Watch again." A chill ran down his spine as he realized the message was sent from his own number. He sank into the chair, fingers trembling, the tape still spinning in the player. The screen flickered once more, then froze on a frame he had never seen before. A distorted reflection of himself, standing not in the showroom, but in an endless void, eyes wide and unblinking, as if trapped in a memory glitch that stretched beyond reason. The room seemed to close in around him as the boundaries between past and present, reality and nightmare fractured completely. What he thought was the end, the solution, was only the beginning. Because if the truth behind what no one tells you was this tangled, this dangerous, then the mystery wasn't unraveling. It was rewriting itself, and the thing watching had been here from the start, feeding off the cracks in his mind, waiting for the moment when everything he believed would collapse. Matthew's world tilted as the phone screen went dark. The only thing left was the faint echo of Rebecca's voice, whispering just beyond comprehension, "Remember me." And suddenly you realize you have to watch it all again, because the story you thought you knew was never the whole story. The memory you trusted is just another lie they told you, and you're not crazy. They just made you think you were. The hidden truth is deeper than you ever imagined, and the real nightmare has only just begun. They aren't alone. Matthew's fractured world was not an isolated nightmare, but a ripple in a hidden current far older and deeper than anyone dared admit. Somewhere beyond the showroom's cold concrete walls, in the static between late-night broadcasts and forgotten chat rooms, others were watching, silent, unseen, yet undeniably present. These were not casual observers or conspiratorial fans hunched over glowing screens. They were the watchers in the shadows, the ones who had known all along, who had felt the tremors of truth long before Matthew ever stepped into that showroom. It began with the messages, cryptic, fragmented, appearing in places no one should have found them. Anonymous emails with nothing but a string of numbers and a faded photograph of the same scratched symbol Matthew had seen etched in that concrete floor. Encrypted codes hidden in the pixels of viral videos, and tweets that vanished moments after posting, yet lingered long enough for the keenest eyes to catch. The phrase repeated in whispered corners of the internet, a mantra haunting the fringe. "You were right all along." The weight of that statement settled heavy, like the final piece to a puzzle no one else could fully see. At night, those connected, scattered souls across the country shared dreams that bled into waking hours, surreal and disturbing. In their shared slumber, they found themselves standing in that endless void from Matthew's last tape, the spiral beneath their feet twisting endlessly inward, pulling them toward a center they never reached. A nameless figure always lurked. In the periphery, its presence a cold promise that the truth was not just hidden, but guarded, locked behind layers of deception so thick they clawed at the edges of sanity itself. Each morning they awoke with fragments, snatches of dialogue and voices that echoed faintly, messages in languages they could almost understand but not quite grasp. Then there were the symbols, appearing everywhere, etched into the peeling paint, of abandoned buildings stitched into the hems of thrift store clothes, blinked at them from graffiti tags and old newsprint ads. These sigils, simple and complex all at once, formed a secret language of warning and invitation. Those who saw them knew they were part of a larger design, woven into the fabric of a reality more fragile and malleable than anyone dared acknowledge. Every glimpse felt like an initiation, a cruel kind of initiation that shattered the comfortable Illusions of identity and memory. In this collective unraveling, a new voice emerged. Someone who didn't claim innocence or ignorance, but authority. A watcher among watchers, known only by the alias Elias. Unlike Matthew, who was tangled in personal trauma and desperate to piece together a lost past, Elias's perspective was colder, surgical, detached. He spoke in encrypted forums and late-night live streams, his words a balm and a blade. They've been watching us for longer than you realize. The files you think are lost, the footage no one was supposed to see, what the government never released is only the surface. Beneath it lies the true archive. Memories rewritten, histories erased. They control not just what you remember, but who you think you are. Elias's presence unsettled even the most grounded among them. His knowledge was profound, yet his motives opaque, his allegiance a question mark that hung over every statement like a guillotine's blade. Was he a liberator or a deeper agent of the force that manipulated reality from the shadows? His appearance was always accompanied by a subtle distortion in audio, glitches that made his voice ripple and fracture, as if he existed somewhere just beyond the veil of their shared experience. Yet when he spoke, he pierced the veil, exposing the lies tangled in their minds, making the invisible visible, but never quite whole. As these threads wove tighter, the watchers began to question the very nature of their existence. If memories could be altered, if identities could be overwritten, then who were they beneath the masks of self they wore each day? Were they the masters of their own stories, or just characters in a script written by a force so subtle it hid in plain sight? The line between reality and illusion blurred, fractured into shards of doubt that cut deep. Every familiar face felt suddenly foreign, every long-held belief a potential fabrication. The conspiracy was no longer something external to be uncovered. It was internalized, a poison in the bloodstream of consciousness. The watchers learned to recognize the signs of control, the inexplicable gaps in their memories, the fleeting sense of déjà vu that wasn't just a trick of the mind, but a clue, the distorted recordings that contradicted their lived experiences. It was as if their minds were battlegrounds where truth and deception fought for dominance, and the winner would decide their fate. Amid this growing paranoia, the watchers discovered something more terrifying. A message left unspoken. A presence, felt but never named. It was not a ghost or a villain in the traditional sense, but a force so intertwined with human perception that it could warp reality itself. It fed on fear and uncertainty, growing stronger each time they questioned what was real. It was a predator stalking the corridors of their minds, waiting for the moment to claim them. The final transmission came unexpectedly, a video file appearing. In inboxes and inboxes across the network, labeled only with a date 2 decades old. The footage was shaky, grainy, found footage from 20 years ago, that seemed innocuous at first glance. A family gathering, laughter, an unremarkable day. But the camera lingered too long on the grandfather's eyes, hollow, reflective, unnervingly still, before the screen abruptly cut to black. Then the chilling message appeared, typed out in stark white text against the void. You were never supposed to remember. Now you see. Now you're part of it. As the watchers absorbed the weight of that message, the screen flickered again, and the familiar spiral symbol emerged, pulsating gently like a heartbeat. The viewers realized with a cold, sinking certainty that the story they thought was Matthew's alone was the surface of a vast, living enigma. A web stretching into every memory, every identity, every whispered doubt. And now, with the walls between reality and nightmare thinning, the watchers themselves were becoming part of the conspiracy they sought to unravel. The question wasn't if they could escape it. The question was how deeply they were already inside. And in the darkness, somewhere beyond sight and sound, the unnamed presence waited, patient, inevitable, watching. Because some truths are never meant to be uncovered. But you've seen them. Anyway, and there's no turning back. Matthew sat alone in the dim light of his small apartment, the weight of everything crashing down around him like a tidal wave he had no choice but to endure. The spiral symbol, the endless, twisting nightmare, seemed burned into his mind, but it was no longer just a sign of something hidden or sinister. It had become a mirror, reflecting the raw, unspoken truths about himself, about all of us. The question was no longer what had happened to him, or to those others watching from the shadows, but why? Why this shattering of memory, this fracturing of identity? What did it reveal about the fragile, terrifying essence of being human? He thought back to the faces, his own, fractured and haunted, Elias's cryptic warnings, the silent watchers, who had reached through the haze with their own broken stories. They all had one thing in common, an unbearable hunger to grasp something real in a world that no longer felt real. Matthew's hands trembled as he stared at the flickering screen, the faint audio glitches whispering secrets he wasn't sure. He wanted to hear. The truth was no longer a prize hidden behind a veil. It was a burden, and it might destroy him. But maybe, just maybe, it could also save him. The walls of his mind felt like they were crumbling, exposing raw nerves of doubt and fear. It was then that he heard it, the quietest confession, not from a stranger or a shadowy figure, but from himself. A voice, fragile and raw, barely a whisper. I don't know if I'm losing myself, or finally finding who I am. This wasn't just a moment of self-doubt. It was a shattering revelation that to confront the truth was to confront the deepest parts of his humanity. The pain, the vulnerability, the endless questions without answers. And then the choice lay before him like a razor's edge, to keep running from the fractured memories, from the watchers, from the spiraling mystery that clawed at his soul, or to dive headfirst into the unknown, to face the force that had been lurking beyond perception, waiting for him to wake up. He knew that waking up wouldn't be peaceful. It wouldn't be a return to normal. It would be an awakening as terrifying as it was necessary. To see clearly was to lose the comforting illusions, to walk a path where every step might shatter what remained of his sense of self. But in that terrifying awakening was a spark, the faintest pulse of hope that maybe, just maybe, the truth was not an enemy, but a guide. That in the darkness where memory and identity blurred, where conspiracy and reality intertwined, there was a possibility of reclaiming something essential, something profoundly human. As the screen's glow dimmed and the room grew colder, Matthew's eyes held a new kind of clarity, a painful, beautiful understanding that this journey wasn't about answers or endings. It was about the question itself, about the courage to face what lies beneath. And in that moment, the spiral didn't just twist outward, it spiraled inward, pulling him not into oblivion, but into the core of what it meant to be alive. A long silence stretched as if the universe itself held its breath. Then, from the depths of that silence, a single line settled over everything, like a ghost whispering just beyond hearing, echoing in the dark spaces between thoughts. Some truths don't want to be found. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.